In a world full of misery, rage, and insomnia, there's a place you can go to just unwind. All you have to do is take a long walk into the mountains, and just past the black house, the secret garden, you'll find a small cabin. Inside that cabin, you'll find the Hole in the Wall Book Club. So now that the dream catcher's hung and the fire started, we invite you to pull up a chair and join the Losers Club as we explore the world of harmless little tricks and gyrating with Elvis. Okay, how do we start this podcast? Hello, and welcome to Hole in the Wall Book Club. There, we did it. I'm Icy, and whoa, I did it. I did the thing where I didn't try to explain what the podcast was, so it made the intro smooth as hell.
Yeah, right.
This is my best friend.
Yeah, Mark.
Formally just pardoned for all putt-putt related crimes.
Which is good.
Yeah.
And yeah, I feel like we pretty much nailed that intro.
Absolutely.
I
Coming
feel
in
like-
strong this season.
Yeah, we're gonna get a lot of positive feedback about that intro. So
Oh yeah. And I think we need it. I said some unkind things about Kubrick. I'm still a little worried about the internet's response. So yeah, coming in hot. Our second season with the new co-host. I'm excited to go into a book that seems a little more ambiguous in quality, in my humble opinion, than The Shining.
well, right, because I mean, again, and I know a lot of people who are also Stephen King readers, and obviously myself as well, and maybe I just don't have that many friends. To be fair, I don't. But I literally don't know anyone who's talking. I don't remember ever talking about this book. I don't know anything about it. This could be a great book. This could be a terrible book. I
Yep.
literally have no idea what we're dealing with here. So
Every person I've mentioned that we're doing this book to outside of the podcast has said, I've never heard of that one. That has been my
Really?
100% reply.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're gonna put it into that today.
Yes. All right. And so this book is divided into parts. We got 3 parts, and then we have chapters without names and subsections. Just numbered subsections.
Which really screwed me up because the chapters themselves are numbered without names. And then the sections of those chapters are also numbered without names. I thought that was a little strange.
We have seen a different format for every single book in this show so far.
And I hope it continues.
I do too. I want a book where all the chapters have just wingding titles and there's subsections with parts in it.
Yeah.
That's what I want. That's like the penultimate. I can't even remember what the stand was. I think the stand had parts, but beyond that, I don't remember.
Ooh, I don't remember either.
I think it was 5 VHS tapes.
That's it?
Yeah, we rented that. We rented the stand from the local video rental place back in the day.
Jesus.
And I was far too young to have been watching that.
I don't watch anything. So anyway, so we start out let's talk about the intro. There was an actual intro before chapter 1.
I wish I had not read the intro. Honestly, it immediately put me on a bad foot with this book. I hated it. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, normally we talk about it first and then we say how we feel.
I am just bubbling over with anger at this intro. Right. It is everything I hate that Stephen King does all in one place.
Okay, so
I'm not going to say anything positive, so go ahead. You start
all right.
this.
So I guess I will introduce the intro because I don't even know if you're ready for that yet.
I would just skip it.
Bashing
don't read that part. Rip it out. Pretend like it's not there.
One literary sort of thing that Stephen King uses in the intro, which I also hate, is he addresses the reader directly. I'm trying to think if I've ever read a book where I liked that.
I like it in Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Yeah,
and I love me some Choose Your Own Adventure books, but that's about it.
Yeah, this is really strange. Actually, my very first note on the intro was, this is weird. It's written directly to the reader.
Yep.
And then it proceeds to introduce like every character in the town of
Hmm.
like after I read the intro, it was all gone out of my memory. All of it.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're given an overview of, hey, here's everyone in the town's name. Here is
Yeah.
their major points of contention. Just a brief overview of like, hey, just so you know, the Baptists and the Catholics are mad at each other for this. These two characters don't like each other, and it's all about to bubble over. I'm
Yeah,
just like,
it was like the intro to like a really bad sitcom.
yeah.
Uh,
And I have a question for you, Mark.
yeah.
Who was the character that spoke directly to you and I in this?
Oh, I have Stephen King, I guess. I like
I
literally, I'm not even making a joke. I have no idea.
Yeah, like, I mean, I could see this have been tolerable if this was written to us by, Leland Gaunt, who's jumping ahead a bit. He is the proprietor of the titular Needful things, but it's not. This guy has this manic energy.
Yeah,
Just
right.
it's no one in this book acts like this guy.
Yeah, and it was like all knowing, right? Because it
Mhm.
knew every single thing about the town, and it was literally just giving you an overview of like everything, and like you don't have any point of reference or context. So like immediately all that, like I had to like read a page and then reread it to be like, wait, what was going on? Who's mad at who now? Like what?
Right,
Is this
and
do I have to memorize all this? Like this is a lot of just a lot of information.
like, jumping forward a bit, like, what we get in these next, 4 chapters that we read for this part is learning about the things that are just basically name dropped here, and I'm assuming we're going to continue learning everything that's talked about here. What was the point? Like, why give me this mini spoiler of everything and then have to rebuild like, what did that accomplish?
Yeah, the intro, and I agree with you. The intro really put me off. Like I got through the intro and there was a point in chapter 1 where it was going really slow for me, and I realized it was because again, I was just so put off by the intro.
Yeah, like,
Um
without the intro, I pretty much enjoyed overall the rest of this without the intro, but the intro kind of ruined a lot of the tension that the rest of the chapters tried to build, because I had an overview of what was happening, and I didn't gain anything from it at all.
yeah, right. And it was weird too because I think one of the things that the intro tries to do here is it tries to press upon you that when a news store opens up in a small town, it's a big deal. Now, that's only one of the things. It definitely does just like an information dump about like the entire town and all of their little squabbles and stuff. But the most important thing is I think you needed to go into chapter 1 understanding, like fully understanding that because I grew up in a city, so when a new store opens up, you're not even going to know about it. Chances are, like you're going to have no idea. It's a huge city. I grew up in a city with
Right.
like 200,000 people. There's
I have a
stores
very opposite
everywhere.
experience, so
Yeah. So, but again, that could have all been done in an intro that was literally a paragraph long.
right?
Like, give me a little bit like, oh, okay, so this is a big deal. That's all I needed to know because that sets the stage for me to understand why in the next 4 chapters that we talk about, it's such a big deal that this store opened and literally pretty much everyone from the town is going to it. I
Right.
would not have understood that as a city guy without this intro, but again, it was just too long.
And yeah, and just I we also do get a little bit of a hint that this is the same place that Cujo happened, and I think a couple other books, but Cujo for sure.
So I still have not read.
Yeah, there's a bit in there where he talks about, a dog that got rabies and killed someone, and I looked it up and confirmed, yeah, Cujo happens in Castle Rock.
Oh, okay. Castle Rock sounds really familiar. I think
There's a
that.
Hulu anthology series called Castle Rock that, they're making.
Oh, okay. I think he used that in some other books too, though.
Yeah, I did a brief look, but then I realized it was gonna be kinda spoilery for this, so I backed off it. but I think it's like somewhere between 4 and 6 books or stories that take place in Castle Rock.
Yeah, it sounds super familiar. But anyway, so yeah, I mean, some things I wrote down about this is they sort of tell you again directly, since the random narrator is talking directly to the reader.
Yep.
They pretty much tell you that something ain't right, and it all has to do with this, basically.
Yep. And then it ends with him being like, and that boy right there. I bet it's all going to start with him. And
Yeah.
that boy is Brian Rusk. Yeah, it was a segue. Look at that segue. I'm going to ruin it by drawing attention to it.
Right.
Yeah, we then get part 1, grand opening celebration in our chapter 1. And Brian is 11-year-old, I believe. Yeah. He's walking home from his late period at school.
Yep.
We find out that Brian is in speech therapy 1 day a week because he was born with a cleft palate, and he fancies his speech teacher.
A great uncomfortable deal.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
It's, if you're a fan of Stephen King, you are not you should be sort of well accustomed to the openness that Stephen King has with like child sort of discovering their own sexuality very slowly. And I would love to, if you're not familiar with this as a reader, maybe you're a new reader of Stephen King, I would love to tell you that it's not weird. Oh no, it is. Every single time. It's super weird.
Oh yeah. If it stops feeling weird, you might have a problem, actually.
Like you might want to talk to somebody.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, it's not super weird yet. We just get that Brian is a crush on his teacher. And then this one threw me off. Just the way it was introduced, it made sense pretty quickly. But there was this bit where Brian notices the awnings on the new store of Needful Things that's closed.
Mhm.
The windows have been soaped over so no one can see inside. There's been buzz going around the town. And there's a bit where Brian's like, those are some nice awnings, and I should know. And I'm like, you're an 11-year-old child. What the
Yeah,
hell do you know about awnings? Find out like his dad works for a siding company. I get it, but it was such a weird statement.
yeah, I'm 34 and I don't know a damn thing about awnings. Like yeah, so that statement sort of struck out to me as well. I was like, "Oh, okay, yeah. All right, yeah, who doesn't?" You're
There's
11 now.
there's a couple lines in this that stuck out to me. But I got one later that just blew me away. But we learn a bit about Brian. We see him going home, talking to his mom. And like most mothers in Stephen King books and set in a small town Maine, she's terrible.
Yeah.
She's not like outright, or at this point, outright Carrie's mom terrible, but
Well, that's a little extreme though. So,
yeah. This is so the thing about this book is it is definitely delving into the whole small town gossip thing. And Brian Rusk's mom is like the gossip central, it seems, always on the phone.
with Myra, right? I think was her name.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was at this point that I'm like, oh my God, this is Salem's Lot. Like,
Ooh.
and the thing is, I'm not yet saying that this is Salem's Lot in a bad way, because this entire section we read did the same thing the beginning of Salem's Lot did. It gave us time to meet the town and see what was going on with everyone. But it does it better than Salem's Lot does because it all is focused around Needful Things, where Salem's Lot was just like, okay, let's tell this dude's story for a while. Now this dude's story. So this might be the thing that Salem's Lot felt like it could have been. And I'm kind of excited about that possibility.
Yeah, and if you look at the sort of evolution of Stephen King's writing style, over his extremely long career, Salem's Lot was written very early on in his career, and Needful Things was written way later.
Right. Needful Things
That
was 91.
yeah
Actually, I
that
looked it up. I did research.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that
That was
actually may
about
be
it.
the case. And it's really interesting that you bring that up because and this is I guess a spoiler about how I feel because I was going to try to wait until the end of this. I really liked the first 4 chapters because it's setting a whole sort of setting. It connects you with many different characters, and it gives you just enough about them to either start to love them or start to hate them. And it
Right.
sort of plants a ton of seeds here and there across the plot. We were like, oh my god, I don't know what's going to happen, because he like Stephen King is just planting so many little seeds here and there, and you're like, holy shit. And this is sort of how I felt with again, The Stand. And I hope I don't bring this book up every single other book that we do, but I probably will.
I do it with Dreamcatcher. You're allowed.
Right.
I'm sorry,
But anyway,
Dreamcatcher, the linchpin of the Stephen King universe.
right, but he does this with The Stand, and it's interesting that books like The Stand and books like this, books like Salem's Lot, they have this structure where Stephen King is like, the book's not really about any person per se. It's about a situation, and I'm just going to introduce you to an entire community of people, and he does it really well.
Right. And
I mean, he did it well in Salem's Lot. He just didn't do anything.
exactly. Salem's Lot. I was excited for that book up until the very end. I was like, wait, you're done? So
Yeah,
I'm cautiously optimistic because I have been vampire burnt before. And
right.
I don't want to open my heart again. At least I get a stake through it in the most like anticlimactic way possible. But I'm optimistic because overall I really did enjoy this chapter.
Yeah, me
I'm
too.
just not ready to love again yet.
It's too soon.
Yeah.
All right, so back to Needful Things. Yeah, Cora Rusk, Brian's mother, is sitting there, I mean, gossiping away to Myra. And again, they're talking about, I think they're talking about the new store and all this stuff. And I don't know if the book sort of, they may have talked about this in the intro, or maybe it's a little bit later, but they bring up this whole concept where there's like this whole schedule about like, you can't be the first person to like visit the store,
Right.
and you don't want to be the last person either. Maybe this was later. I think it maybe was,
It
but
was later, but I think with this, we're gonna kind of there's a lot of different threads that kind of weave in and out. So we're gonna be a lot less linear when we talk about this because it's a lot of just set up different people's stories.
yeah, without me taking literally like 30 pages of notes, yeah, I'm gonna jump around a lot. So
Yeah.
anyway,
And that tends to be like, I mean, that was very much how we had to do Salem's Lot at the beginning. There was just so many different dropping details here and there that it was more just much less linear than we did in The Shining until we get to later. So it'd be fine.
and then we get this really random sort of drop again from the this, I guess the narrator, right? Where
Mhm.
it's like, little did Brian know, he was going to learn a lot about needful things before anyone else.
Yep.
Um,
Which is now twice that we have been directly told that this story starts with this kid. Like, you could have just started this story with this kid. Like,
right, right.
so
Oh,
we
go ahead.
jump ahead to Brian's like the day before Needful Things is supposed to open. And he's daydreaming about his teacher and
Mhm.
notices the store has an open sign up.
Which is technically the day before they're
Right.
technically supposed to open. Yeah.
Um, this is where we get the first like bit of tension here, and it's Brian like being like, I want to go in there, and he keeps trying to talk himself out of it.
Hmm.
What he doesn't admit to himself is he's scared. He doesn't really know why. He doesn't ever directly say it, but he's scared to go in. Just has this fear of walking in. And what finally pushes him over the edge is being like, yeah, but if I do go in there and I'm the very first person to go in, my mom will definitely listen to me talk and not stare at the TV. My mom will acknowledge I exist. I'm going in.
Right. I think it was like a very low key pulling on some heartstrings for people
Yep.
who grew up with like physically present but mentally absent parents. And I was like, man, that's harsh. Like I feel really bad for this kid right now. He's like, man, I just want my mom to talk to me. I was like, oh shit.
Yep.
Jesus. Well, you might not want to go into here, but okay. Anyway, so yeah, he walks in, and this is our first chance to meet which is most likely going to be our antagonist here,
You
Leland
think
Gaunt.
so? I
Yeah,
had a
maybe.
vibe, but I'm really
Maybe.
glad The Shining taught me about foreshadowing because I think he's using it in this book too.
Right. Just a little bit. Yeah, Stephen King is not subtle at all with his foreshadowing. Although
No.
I would say a lot of times it works really well though.
I mean, I so there are two levels of Stephen King foreshadowing. There's the like Shining level where it is not subtle, but it works really well. And then there is this intro of and some random disembodied voice saying, "Hey, you reader, this place is about to blow over." And that might be a little much.
Yeah, the intro, yeah, I don't understand the intro. We could have gotten it all, but anyway. So yeah, then we have this entire scene with Leland Gaunt and Brian. I don't know if you want to sort of take the lead on this one because this is our first sort of deal, I would say.
Yeah, so we get Leland, who I want to point out has just beautiful blue eyes. They look just like Sally, the Sally Ratcliffe, the teacher Brian's crushing on.
Yep.
Beautiful blue eyes. Um, and he's an old dude who we're consistently going to get this guy described as old and shouldn't really be attractive, but
But
mm,
definitely is.
I want to fuck him.
Yeah,
Like
right. Yeah.
like he's got distinctly crooked teeth and hands that make people feel terror when he touches them generally. But man, he's fuckable.
Yeah. Other than those things, he's great.
Yeah. And it starts with basically he's also always described as just charming and everyone likes him. To the point that in this conversation with him and Brian, and Leland, Mr. Gaunt is inviting him to like look around his store, basically saying, I wanted one person in here early. You'll be better advertisement than anything else I could throw at go look at go look at shit.
Right.
And there's a point where Brian walks over to a display case and he's thinking, oh, he's going to follow me around. I hate it when people do that. No, he didn't. It's like he read my mind and knew it would make me more comfortable if I didn't. And I think that's a little bit of foreshadowing.
And this isn't the first time this has been brought up either. This gets brought up later where Leland Gaunt seems to understand that subtle things like people don't want to be followed around and so my question to you is, do you think that he can actually read those things? I mean, obviously, clearly he can read enough to where he knows what your desire is, right?
Right.
So he has some sort of power, but I mean, I just wonder at what level can he actually read thoughts? Like, can he literally read everything? I don't
And
know.
this is where I get really concerned with my possible enjoyment of this book in the future. Because I am butting up into the exact same problem I had with the antagonist from Salem's Lot. I could never get a handle on how hypnotizing he could be. And with that vampire dude, I can't remember his name, but with him, he would go through this like when he was turning someone to a vampire, he would hypnotize him, and he would talk about how they'd look into his eyes, and he was putty in their they were putty in his hands. But then
Yeah.
he'd also like offer them this like, and here I could give you everything you want. It's like, why are you tempting them if you can hypnotize them? So I don't know.
Well, I think that maybe, and I'm just sort of trying to go off of now again because I don't know anything about the book. I don't really know what Leland Gaunt is per
Right.
se. Like, I don't know if he's a vampire or a demon or a ghost I have no idea. Or just a really sexy old man. I don't know.
Mm.
But maybe the part of that is you have to make a conscious deal. Almost like like a vampire. You have to consciously sort of invite them into your house.
Right.
Like, I'm only speculating, and I have no
Oh, and
prior knowledge of this at all, really.
where I'm at right now is I I'm not judging it yet, and I'm just hoping that I will feel good about this by the end. But I'm scared because of Salem's Lot.
I completely understand. And what I have from this so far is that his looks and his charm is basically like what's the best way of putting this? That's not going to sound weird. It's basically an aphrodisiac in a way.
I can see that.
It's just putting you in the mood, but you
He's like the
still have to make the
penultimate
decision.
salesman.
Yeah.
You can do all the right things. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so going through this, Brian eventually becomes fixated on this little splinter of wood. Gaunt walks over. There's this exchange that gets, I'm not going to say sexual, but it gets uncomfortably tense.
Yeah.
He ends up dropping the splint. Like he says that it's a fossilized piece of wood, possibly from the Ark, from like Noah's Ark.
Yeah.
He drops it into Brian's hand, and Brian starts feeling the ocean and basically has like a sense memory of being on a boat.
Yep.
And I don't know if you've done any Shadowrun, but it feels like Leland Gaunt is just dealing like BTL better than life chips and just like hot jacking people with this shit. Because there is an implication that everything he sells does this thing to some extent.
Well, what's weird about this too is because my initial theory about this interaction was that this splinter of wood was sort of the focus of his power. But then later on, again, we're going to go back and forth on this thing. Later on, he doesn't use the splinter of wood on anyone else, and he doesn't sell the splinter of wood to Brian. That's not what Brian's need, quote unquote, need is. He's an 11-year-old kid. He doesn't give a shit about a splinter of wood.
He thinks it's cool as hell, but like even after it might be part of Noah's Ark. The thing Brian latches onto is it's 2,000 years old. That's cool as hell.
Mm-hmm. Right. So then they get on this subject. I think Leland Gaunt directly asks him, like, what do you want or what are you into? Like, I can't remember exactly how he puts it, but they get on the subject of baseball cards.
Yeah, he's basically tells him like, what do you need? Like,
yeah,
the first thing that comes to mind, what do you need? And Brian yells out, Sandy Koufax.
Which I had originally immediately thought was a woman.
Same. I thought I had just misremembered the teacher's name.
See, that's what I thought too. Okay,
cool.
You weren't the only one. That's where I thought the book was going, and I really, really hoped it was not going in that direction.
Oh, yeah. But we find out that basically Brian collects a specific year of baseball cards, and that's one he really wants.
Yep. And then so Leland Gaunt, he goes in the back room, he's like shuffling around, he's getting stuff, and Brian is like in the sort of main store area, and he's like, oh man, I've done this before. He's not gonna have the right year. He's gonna have I think he's looking for like a 65 or something. He's like he's gonna have like a 64 or 66 or something like that. And Leland Gaunt comes out with the exact right year, and it's physically signed and made out to Brian.
Yep. Oh, and part of Brian's thoughts through this is and even if he has it, I only have 80 cents in my pocket, and this thing is like $160 card.
Mm-hmm.
So then Gaunt gets a little intense about value and money, and basically agrees that tells Brian you can pay for this in 2 parts. Oh, I'm sorry. He puts this card into Brian's hand. And Brian has the sense memory of being the child on the fence and seeing Sandy Koufax and hand him the card and Sandy Koufax signing it. And by the end of this, Brian basically pays, it's all of the money in his pocket except 6 cents, and agrees to some favor that he doesn't remember what it is.
And more importantly, he doesn't remember what it is, and we don't either.
All we know is that it's something to do with Wilma. I actually don't know how to say her last name. Jerziak.
I have no idea.
Wilma.
Yeah. Yep.
Which is someone who lives down the street from his mom, and that's all we know.
Yeah, and that's pretty much how it ends. That's the first deal that is made, and I think that's what sort of ends chapter 1.
Yep.
So chapter 2, and this is going to happen a lot with when he's introducing a whole town. Chapter 2 is going to completely focus on a different character. Chapter 2 introduces oh my gosh, I can't even read my own handwriting. Polly
Chalmers.
Chalmers. Okay, that was the part that I couldn't recognize. So Polly is sort of the eccentric person in the town that left for like 10 years, and
She, like,
she
left when she was pregnant, and when she eventually came back, like, hasn't said a word about it. No one knows what happened, and the town's obsessed with finding out, but no one knows.
and she doesn't have a kid, by the way. I mean,
Right.
she left pregnant, and now she's just single and like dating the sheriff who just lost his family a year and a half ago as well. So
Yep.
you,
She's a
again, you
town
have no idea.
scandal who doesn't care. And it's
Right.
also important to know she has really bad arthritis in her hands.
Yeah, terribly bad. And she just kind of says, F it, right? And she decides that she's gonna bring a cake to Leland Gaunt like the second he opens,
Yep.
pretty much.
She's our town's rebel. She's one of our good guys that it's gonna focus on.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, you do sort of get the feeling here that that she's probably going to be a main character, and yeah, she's probably going to be one of the people that you're sort of rooting for. Although I could be
Yep.
wrong.
So she and Gaunt have a exceedingly pleasant conversation. And I'm saying exceedingly pleasant because Polly is continually in her head thinking about how much she hates all the normal little things that people do, and then noting that Leland doesn't do them.
Yeah, and I think this just goes back to like his either magical way of picking up on what people want, or maybe it is like a vampire thing where he's so old, like he's thousands of years old, where he's just a literal master at picking up on like human behavior.
Right.
And yeah, because like you said, like all the normal things. Man, I'm trying to think of some of the things that she brought up that caught her off guard, but in a sort of delightful way.
Like after she explained her arthritis, because like her hands are like physically like hooked a bit from the arthritis, so it's not something that physically shows. There's this bit where she's like, "Oh, now he's gonna commiserate with me and tell me about his dad who had bad arthritis," and he just doesn't. And it was little things like that. Like she enjoyed the conversation because he didn't ask questions about her; he asked questions about the town.
Right. And you already know that she's super private. So that just sort of played into her personality. Anyway, so I think there's a point where they share cake together.
Devil's
Right.
food cake.
Right.
And it's very important that she's noted his beautiful hazel eyes.
Yes. Again, the eyes, and yes, they did change color.
At this point, every time we get a character who is in a scene with Leland, who then physically describes Leland, they will describe his beautiful blank colored eyes.
Right.
It happens over and over. Every single person has seen his eyes differently and describes them as beautiful in some way.
And that just goes back to the sort of the vampire thing, but it doesn't explain the sort of the needful thing, making deals sort of thing, which makes
I'm
me
thinking
believe
demon. That's where I'm leaning.
Yeah,
It's
I
got a
think
demon
that's
thing.
probably right. So,
But
yeah, go ahead.
so we're gonna have to kind of speed through some of this. So we're gonna be missing out on details because when he does the full town setup, it's super hard to know which parts to really focus on. So yeah. Some of this is going to be kind of skimming through. But did you have anything more on Polly? Like we find out she
Well,
runs a sewing shop and
yeah.
employs a couple people there who we're gonna meet in a little bit.
The important thing that I would say is that when she leaves, no one else in the store, and you get the very last thing that Leland Gaunt says when he's by himself, which he says, "Yes, she will do."
Yep.
You get this
I
very
forgot about that.
sinister feeling, like a predator is like putting his eyes and saying, "Yep, she'll do fine."
Yep. And with that in mind, we get another thing with Polly later that I think is going to set the foreshadowing a bit more. But from there, basically Polly's it's like after a night of drinking, Polly coming into the store is the first time you go to and take a piss. She pops the seal and the rest of the town is ready to come on into the store.
Yep. So a bunch of other people arrive.
We get this scene with a Cindy Rose.
Mhm.
She finds a vase that she haggles for a bit and becomes a bit obsessive about. Like there comes this big intensity, like as the haggling starts, because nothing has price tags.
Yes.
She realizes how much she really likes it. It's like, that was all right. Ooh, that thing is perfect. And she gets it for a decent price, walks away feeling good about it, and is told that he might have a matched vase coming in later. So I bet that's gonna come back.
Right.
Basically, throughout this whole thing, everyone we meet, he starts planting seeds of something in them.
Exactly. And then we get this. I think Nettie Cobb is Polly's like assistant, right? She
She baked the
also,
cake.
yeah, she comes in, and that's mentioned too. Nettie Cobb is the actual one who made the cake, and she comes in with somebody else who works at the sewing shop, like a
I don't
friend.
remember her name, but
I
yeah.
don't remember either because I don't think she even comes up again. Um, it's important to know that Nettie Cobb, and this doesn't come up till later, but I'm just going to bring it up now because it's important to understand where she's at. She is extremely, extremely timid, and part of this was she dealt with emotional and physical abuse by her husband
And
for years.
I think it's also implied her mom as well before that. I think there's
I
like a
think
throwaway that line there.
right. And it got so bad to where finally one day her husband like broke her carnival glass, right? And she kills him.
Yep, just put a serving fork through his throat while he was asleep.
And she spent like 2 years in a I think it was like 2 years or maybe longer in like a
I think
mental
it
health
was either 2 or
facility.
5, I don't remember which one.
Yeah.
But
But
yeah, in a, psychiatric ward, and, she's on a work release program working at the sewing shop.
right. And none of that is introduced now, but it's just important to know who Nettie Cobb is. And now she is to the point where it's clearly like she still has a lot of like psychological issues going on. Extremely, extremely timid, never goes outside of her bubble. And this is why she's going to Needful Things with someone else. She's not going just with a friend because it's more fun. She's going because she literally, like psychologically, is not going to go here by herself. Period.
To the point that, Polly didn't think she was gonna go at all, even with the friend.
Yeah, right. Exactly. But she does go. She goes with a friend, and again, Leland Gaunt starts talking to her about Carnival Glass. And again, as the reader, you don't know the significance of that just yet, I think.
Right. We
And
just know she
he's
loves it.
right, like she's like, "Oh, this is great," and he's kind of still like saying this whole thing where like I'm still unpacking the store. I'd love, I'm still gonna eat the cake. I think she's like, why don't you come by or something like
Ouch.
tomorrow? I think.
Yeah,
I
to take a
can't
look
remember.
at the full selection and get the cake box back.
Right, right. And I think that's it that I have for chapter 2. I think you're right. We
Um,
might have to skim
the
over
only
some of
other
this, but
things that happen there is we briefly get introduced to, the Wilma Jerkes, or whatever her name was, to
yeah,
Wilma. She walks into the store, we find out she is an angry, big, muscular woman, and she and Nettie do not like each other. She scowls at Nettie, and Nettie scurries off out of the store.
yep,
And
scared her away.
that whole chapter ends with Brian's mom asking Leland Gaunt about the picture of Elvis.
Which I actually didn't think was going to come back up, but oh boy,
Oh,
does
but
it.
it comes back up.
Yeah,
Ah,
comes
I
up in
just
a big
never
way.
thought I'd have to write down Elvis sex scene in my notes for this show. I really never thought I'd have to write that.
And yet here we are. So
Here we are.
big spoiler
Here
for
we
like
are.
chapter 4. Here we go. Yeah.
But yeah, okay. Chapter 3. Let's get through it so we can get to that Elvis sex scene.
Okay, so and yeah, I think we're gonna have to. There's so many deals going on. So basically, we have this other character, Hugh Priest. He's like a drunkard. He gets kicked out of a bar one night, and it's like small town late. So I think it's like 10:30 at night. Everything is closed. The town is pretty much dead asleep. But out like crazy enough, Needful Things is
Yep.
open. So he walks in, and this is extremely glossing over it, but again, he finds his needful thing based on something that happened
It's
in
a
his past.
foxtail that reminds him
Reminded
of the
him,
cool
yep,
foxtail his dad used to have in the convertible. And like we get full flashes of him looking at this being like, I could be the kind of guy at a foxtail on my antenna. I could be the kind of guy who goes to AA and gets clean. It's fucking wild.
Yeah, it's this whole thing where I want to talk about this a little bit at the end. But yeah, he sort of fantasizes about all the things that would change if he got this foxtail. But anyway, so he makes a deal, and Leland Gaunt says, "Hey man, you know Nettie Cobb, right?" And he's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "All right, well, here's the real price of it." And again, sort of the scene goes away, and you just know that he has to do something to Nettie Cobb, but you don't know what it is.
Let's see. Other people we meet in that chapter, we get Alan Pangborn, who's going to be one of our big protagonist people, I'm feeling. He is the sheriff.
Yep.
We basically learned that his wife and his kid died in a tragic way about 1.5 years ago. And
I don't think it ever tells you what it is.
we don't know yet what it is, yeah.
Okay.
And
Sure.
he has the depression. And this is the first time in this, I want to point out that I have been listening to this in audiobook mainly.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And this audiobook does a few things. And the character of the depression, holy shit. I mean, this narrator's like, "Hey, Alan, how you doing today, buddy? I'm just here to remind you, your kid and wife are dead. I hope you're doing great." And like he gives it almost a cartoony sing-song voice, which fits. And I loved it.
Yeah, right. And I'm reading it, and that's how it's sold into the book. And it's this really sort of sad. I think the narrator sort of nailed it.
Yep.
That's sort of how I envisioned it in my head anyway, because the sarcasm is so thick in the book where that's pretty spot on. So,
but I think just to breeze through Alan in general through here, what we learn about Alan, because I'm certain we're going to be focusing on what he's actually doing here soon. He's got the dead kid and the wife, so that's how we know he's the protagonist. And he is dating Polly. Also, he's really into shadow puppets. That came up several times, and very good at them.
Okay, hold on. And man, we don't even have enough time to cover this. He's really good. He's like imitating other people. And it's like, oh yeah, this guy is a big guy. And he's like fat. And oh yeah, I'll do you because you're really skinny and this is clearly you. And he's doing like for me, I'm like, oh, somebody's doing a bunny rabbit or something. No, he's like doing a whole zoo. Like he's doing like lions. And I'm like, what? Is this possible? Like,
it's wild. There's a point at which these shadow puppets are going to be important. They have to be, because there's a point at which he's finally alone and he talks about unleashing the menagerie from his hands. And like, are you fucking kidding, dude?
And yeah, it's so detailed. Yeah, I think he was imitating a person. He was like, and again, these are shadow puppets. If you're listening to this now, it's shadow puppets with his hands. We're not talking about anything else here. And he's like, oh yeah, he's imitating like the town selectman, and he like walks in, he's like adjusting his pants or something, and you're like, what?
Yup.
With your you're doing shadow puppets? I can hardly do a rabbit.
A couple of other people we meet at the police station. We meet the dispatcher, Sheila. I don't know if she's going to be important yet. We barely see her, but we meet Norris, the deputy.
Yep.
And Norris is the kind of guy who vomits when he's nervous and gets nervous a lot. I mean, perfect cop, right?
Great deputy.
Yep. And while there, we also meet the selectman, the Danforth Keaton, who everyone calls Buster Keaton behind his back.
Yeah.
And we meet him because Alan tells Norris, hey, go ticket his car. He parked in the handicap spot again. And later we get a confrontation where Danford walks into the bathroom and slams Norris against the wall.
Yeah.
Assaults an officer for giving him a $5 ticket.
Yeah. And if you're trying to get a sense for what this character's like, the best way of putting it is he's an officious little prick.
Yep. I think he's an officious big prick.
Yeah, actually, yes.
He's a town selectman in a Stephen King novel, so he's just the worst person. I'm assuming he's running a drug empire.
Yeah, and again, I guess we have to skip around because this is covered in the next chapter.
Right.
But it's said over and over again where Alan, the sheriff, is like, okay, I've known this guy for a long time. And it gets to the point where he even brings it up to the town selectman later. He actually broaches this subject with him. And he says, look, man, I've known you for a long time, but this is different. Like, what's going on?
Yep.
Like, you get this hardcore feeling, and this is described, you can't tell if it's like fear or something else. Like, so you don't really know, but yeah, something is going on with him in the background.
Yep.
Which is,
And like Keaton basically threatens to fire Norris because essentially the power dynamic here is that Alan, as the sheriff, is an elected official.
Yep.
Everyone else that works there, the town selectman can just fire.
Yep.
That's the weird power dynamic they have.
Yeah. And then obviously the sheriff intervenes and he's like, yeah, no, you're not gonna fire my deputy.
Yep.
That's not. And then they basically make up, even though it's kind of a tension, a sort of tensionous. I don't know the word I'm looking for here. It was not a good makeup. It was basically like, all right, let's stop fighting and let's just go on our way here.
Yeah. I think so we skipped around a bit. We got a bit of chapter 4, like resolution of the cop stuff there, but a couple things to go over still in chapter 3. We got a point where Alan called Polly, and basically he can hear in her voice that her hands are hurting the hell out of her because it sounds like she's on some painkiller. I can't remember what they were called in that.
I thought
I think.
Oh, I thought it was Percocet, but maybe you're
right.
It
It was similar to Percocet, but it was just off as like Percodon or Percodans. I don't know. It was a term I'd never heard before.
Yeah.
But he basically is like, I'm feeling tired from being in court all day dealing with my job. I'm not gonna come in every night. And these two seem to really love each other. But it sets us up for a short section where Polly's trying to hang up the phone. It falls off, and we basically get her sobbing about how terrifyingly bad her hands hurt and the fear of them getting worse and worse.
Exactly.
And that ends with her basically being like, I would give anything for these to be better.
Yes.
Which would have been really, really confusing if I hadn't learned about foreshadowing in The Shining.
Yeah, I heard arthritis tends to creep on you. So
yeah, it does. It creeps.
Yeah.
And like, I'm gonna get a little too personal here, like I do occasionally. This scene hit me hard because as someone who's schizoaffective, which is a disease that can be degenerative, like that fear that like, oh, I could just slowly lose functionality over time and there's nothing I can do to stop that. I fucking vibe with that girl. I would also accept a demon deal or whatever from whatever's coming for you, Polly. I'm with you. I'm pre-forgiving you for what you're about to do. Just so I'm choosing sides before I know the stakes. That's
hey,
that high risk, low reward thing I do.
Yes, so do they. So
oh.
So the last thing that I want to say about this chapter is we go back to Brian briefly, and he has a dream.
Oh, we wanted to talk about that?
Huh?
I was going to pretend like it didn't happen, just glaze past
well,
it.
The thing that,
discuss it.
The only thing that I want to bring up
I'm
here
gonna be clear.
is not...
In this dream, this 11-year-old child is getting jerked off by his speech teacher.
I'm
not going to let it go. I need to put on record. Come on.
Right. It's super weird, but at the same time, you're like, I don't know, like it's as guys here, like I'm trying to remember when I started having dreams like that.
Yeah, I mean, okay.
I mean,
it's not as weird as if it had been the teacher having the dream. I'll give him that. Like, I get it.
Yeah, it's one of those things.
It just hit you.
Where it's like, why is this in the book? Like, yeah, it doesn't need to be in the book. Anyway.
And then he wakes up from that, and we see a brief glimpse of his obsession with this card. Like, he freaks out thinking the card's going to be gone, flips through, pulls the card out, and just feels right with the universe when he's holding it.
Right. And I think it even expresses his fear about losing it. Just the possibility of possibly losing this card.
Mm-hmm.
It's even brought it up. I think it brings it up either in this chapter or in chapter 4, where Brian literally like constantly checks on this card.
Right.
And there's no logical reason to believe it, but he just loves the card and he checks on it all the time just to make sure it's still in his, card binder.
Oh, yeah.
Like frequently, even in the middle of the night. So,
yeah. And we are running low on time, so let's burn through the last bit of this chapter 4 because we've hit parts of this already.
Right.
We
So
start out with Nettie.
Nettie makes. Yeah, go ahead.
We watch Nettie go in. We get a very brief bit on that where basically Nettie gets this carnival glass lampshade. This is when we get the reveal that her husband breaking her carnival glass was what set her off.
Yep.
And she agrees to do something to Keaton. Just a harmless little prank. Play a trick on him.
And again, another deal where we don't know what it is. But she
she
doesn't
is
know either.
Explicitly given a key as well. He gives her a key.
Yep.
So, and we get an outside perspective as she's walking out of the store, and it's Polly talking to whatever the other name is of the woman that works in her store. And they're watching Nettie, and they're like, man, she looks so spaced out. Holy shit, she looks like she just had an orgasm.
Yeah. And then there's like this whole joke, and they're like, maybe she had 3. I don't know.
And that's going to hit a little bit weirder later.
Yeah, it's going to be relevant really quick here.
Yeah.
Because so then we have the sheriff, and we're not going to cover this again, but this is the next scene is sheriff. Basically, we have the scene with him talking to Keaton, which we've already actually covered in the last chapter because we were skipping around. The sheriff also has a very long sort of discussion with Father Rose, I think, and this is
Reverend Rose.
Yes, sorry,
he's Baptist.
That's right, Reverend Rose. And this is the sort of going back and forth between the Baptists and the Catholics. The Catholics are having some casino night, and
it's not technically gambling because it's money that ends up being traded out for prizes.
Yep.
But it's basically to establish that the Catholics and the Baptists are pissed at each other and there's trouble brewing there.
Right. So then you have a scene where earlier Myra and Cora had saw this Elvis picture.
Yep. And these are the best friends.
These are the best friends. They both want it. And Myra passes the store. It's on a Tuesday, which is appointments only. She doesn't have an appointment. But the only thing she can think about is what if Cora comes in first thing Wednesday morning and gets that Elvis picture. And I can't, I can't deal with that. Right?
Nope. No, fuck that. No. Elvis, that picture's got to be mine.
Mm-hmm.
And holy shit.
Yeah, she goes in and it's crazy. Leland Gaunt sort of allows her to hold this picture, and then she has this entire I guess vivid experience where like she's on stage with Elvis.
He's called her up, they're gyrating and
yeah, right. And like Cora's like in the crowd, just like staring at her, like, oh god, I'm so jealous and mad at you at the same time.
One other thing I want to put out about the audiobook version of this that I have been listening to is it occasionally adds music. So during this entire scene that gets, let's say, steamy, we have what I have to assume is copyright-free public domain Elvis-ish music intensely pumping over this.
That's good.
And the music is so spread out throughout that I always forget it exists until it slams me in the face. And this scene blew me away. Much in the same way it blew her away. Because we cut out of this and we see Leland Gaunt like sterilely watching her sit on a chair having a straight up orgasm.
Right. And this is where I think the book is starting to get really interesting because you're starting to see Leland sort of break a little bit of his exterior control. He's done it in sort of microseconds earlier with his interactions with other people, but he pretty much just watches her have an orgasm. He's like not impressed, whatever. He doesn't care. And then they make this. He actually gets really mad at her because he's like, how much do you want to pay for this? And I think she's like $40. And he basically is like, get out of my store.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's like, I know.
The cordialness is gone. He is immediate hard edge angry salesman.
Right. He literally goes from 0 to like, yeah, he's like super rude. And he's like, yeah, just get out of my store. Like you're insulting my intelligence.
Yep.
Which is interesting too, because this is the first time that Leland Gaunt has ever made like an issue about like physical money. Like
We
until
got
this
a tiny snippet of it with I can't remember his name, the drunkard with the foxtail. Because there's a bit where he goes on a kind of rant at the world about everyone wanting to solve all their problems with their wallet. But it's a very brief thing. This is the first time it's been directed like at a specific person.
Yeah, he was almost commiserating with the drunk guy. He was like,
Right.
yeah, everybody seems to always want to solve problems with money, don't they? And the drunk guy's like, yeah, I guess you're right. Never heard it like that. But this is like, no, how dare you get out of my store? And he's mad because she didn't offer money. And he knows that she can.
Right.
And he specifically wants her to offer an amount of money where her husband's going to know about it. Because she
she'll
has
have
to
to
write
write
a
a
check.
check. And
Right.
she says a couple things, and I can't tell if because this is a Stephen King novel, I can't tell if this is an honest, true statement or the standard hyperbole. Because she said there's a couple times she gets cut off, and it seems like she's about to say, like, my husband will beat me. And there's a point at which she says, like, if I spend that much, my husband will kill me. And because it's a Stephen King novel, I legitimately can't tell if her husband is beating the shit out of her for spending too much money before or if
Yeah,
this is a hyperbolic statement.
right. I wasn't quite sure either. And
But I'm
okay,
sure
so
we'll find out.
here's the interesting part of this. Just one of the so they finally agree on a price, and then out of the blue, he's like, "Yeah, and you're gonna blow me too."
Yep.
And this was weird because generally I don't really like things like this, but honestly, I felt like this was written really well. And this got me very interested to see how Leland Gaunt's character, like how his evilness is going to be exposed over time.
Right.
Because you can tell he doesn't really want a blowjob for like sexual reasons. He's doing it literally just to basically torture her.
Not like a page before. There's a point where she's like, you wouldn't believe what happens when you hold that, and he's like, I wouldn't want to know. It looks sweaty.
Yeah,
And like
he's like almost
he has just
disgusted.
total disdain for sexuality. Like you
Right.
can just feel it dripping off him. And
And then once she agrees to it, like she's like,
she's like,
no, I can't
she's
do
like
that.
crawling, she's like clawing at his crotch, trying to like get his zipper down.
Right. And then he says this thing, which
I don't know
had
how
to
to
read
deal
like 3
with
times
this.
because it almost made me laugh so hard. He was like, no, don't do that. I think he's like, blowjobs generally give me amnesia.
No, yeah, he says, no, forget it. Oral sex gives me amnesia anyway. What the fuck does that mean? You know,
Like,
I hope that's not a colloquialism. I hope that is a like secret tool that we'll come back to later. Like, I hope that the resolution of this plot is someone has to blow Leland Gaunt so he'll forget his evil plan. That would, I don't care what else happens. That would make it worth it to me.
so to me, I took it as an insult, basically saying that like, no, like I hate this so much that I basically have to forget it afterward, you know? And that's what made it so funny to me.
I guess
So.
so. It just I couldn't process it. Like I just fucking hard faulted, like blue screened, and like woke up 3 days later struggling to understand what I just read.
Right.
Oh,
So okay, so
okay.
anyway, he makes her pay an amount of money which she's not comfortable paying, which her husband will notice. He then convinced her to and again only to torture her, convinces her to give him a blowjob, which he then denies. Like he's like, no, don't do that. It's disgusting. And then the very last thing is he says, okay, but you need to play a prank on somebody. And it's a character that I wrote down Buford. I don't
He
remember
was
this
name dropped
character.
very briefly. I think he owns the bar of the guy who got kicked out of the bar. So
Oh,
he was name
yeah, you're
dropped
right.
very briefly.
You're okay. You're right.
And then so
Yeah.
that is the actual like end of the chapter there, but interspersed in within that scene, we had another scene going on, which is the end of Brian's story in this bit. And I am
Right.
so glad that this was included in this chapter because I was really worried we wouldn't see anything of what these favors were, but we do get to see like what Brian ends up having to do.
Yes.
And I'm gonna kind of skim through this because we're going long, but it basically boils down to him sneaking into lost her name. Fucking too many names. We got spoiled in The Shining.
Wilma
Wilma.
Jerzyk. I don't know.
So we see him sneaking into Wilma's yard, and the whole time he's got all these contingency plans. Like, if she's home, I'm going to say I'm selling magazines. I hope she can't tell I'm lying. We get a couple times where he's like, I don't know if I can do this. And then he's like, oh, but that card though.
Yep.
And basically by the end of this, he throws a shit ton of mud on all her white linens hanging in her backyard.
Yeah. Again, nothing like violent, nothing crazy, just enough to probably terrorize this.
Yep. This woman that I guess we should point out, like, we know a little bit from Alan that some of the issues between Nettie and Wilma were Nettie had a dog that was barking and Wilma was threatening the dog.
Yep.
So yeah, we can just see this. All these favors are going to start building a powder keg here, as we were told in the introduction.
Right. Rather, they were rather forward about that.
Yeah. I just wish it hadn't been, because this would have been a really cool reveal without that.
So I know we're running late, but I wanted to talk about this. When we did The Shining, that book is the theme of that book is obviously, how, I guess not obviously, but it's about how addiction affects you and your family, right?
Right.
Specifically like narcotics or alcohol or something like that. This book, which is pretty obvious, is how we fool ourselves into thinking that we need, quote unquote, need something. Like, for now, it's like, I need this thing on Amazon, or I need this new thing, and how far we're willing to go with it. And I actually thought the Foxtail story was the most interesting, because that just goes to show you just how much people tell themselves to convince themselves to buy something. Because again, he's like, if I just bought this Foxtail, I could go to AA, I could turn my life around, I can do all of these things. So this whole section, or this whole book, is literally just about this concept of letting shopping take over our lives. And this is said more than once. Leland has this saying, right, that he says to customers every once in a while. He says, hey, come in and leave some of the happiness you bring. And it sounds like a really nice thing, but really what he's saying, come into my store with your happiness and leave some of it behind.
Oh, it's ominous as fuck.
Right. And yes. I'm digging this a lot. Like,
I am enjoying it. I am very excited to continue reading. I am terrified that it's all going to fall apart. Because I see, and that's the thing about Stephen King. If the books were just bad, I wouldn't give a shit. But it's that even when there's parts of the books I'm like, I hate this. What is happening? There's always enough good there that I'm like, this could have been so good.
Right.
And I'm just hoping this falls more on the Shining side than the Salem's Lot side.
Exactly. All right.
And
so
if it wasn't for the intro, I would be so much more confident.
I feel a lot of confidence because I really like Leland's character, and it's hard to make a really good antagonist that you're really interested in seeing what he's going to do. All right.
I'm excited.
What's our next section here?
Our next section, we are doing chapters 5 through 8.
Alrighty.
Yeah. And it's gonna after episode 3 we'll be done part 1. So I think that'll be most of our setup. We'll probably get into that's my prediction, is that once we get to episode 4, we're going to be into a more like linear story a bit more. So I think part 1 is going to be entirely introducing and setting up this powder keg.
If it's that much setup, I'm gonna have to draw a diagram on a whiteboard.
I might pull out the old yarn and board here.
Yeah, right.
I'm kind of hoping I get a chance to make a full-on conspiracy board.
Right.
I like that. All right.
Dedicate half my house to it.
So thank you for joining us again for our new season. I am. I've been. I don't know how to end this fucking podcast. Your turn.
We know. Okay. Well, thanks for reading the first part of the book, and you've read that part, and enjoy watching YouTube videos of putt putt since we can't go right now.
Yeah.
Hole in the Wall Book Club is a part of the Icynewyear Productions Network, and produced and edited by Anthony Sheets. The music in this episode is Supernatural Radio by Kevin MacLeod. There'll be a link to his license and website in the show notes. If you want to get a hold of us, tweet us at Icynewyear, or send an email to icynewyear@gmail.com. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to tell a friend, or leave us a review on your podcatcher of choice. Word of mouth and 5-star reviews really help us get out in front of more people, and let us expand and do more things. More information on the show can be found on icynewyear.com. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.